There's a quiet kind of sorrow that many kind-hearted people carry, a sense that no matter how much they give, it's rarely truly seen. Perhaps you've felt it too. You offer your time, your patience, your care, and in return silence, dismissal, or even disrespect. It can leave you wondering, why does kindness so often go unnoticed, or worse, unappreciated? Carl Jung called it the shadow, the hidden part of the psyche that holds not only our suppressed fears and impulses, but also our unlived strength. When we give endlessly without limits, without honoring our own needs, we unconsciously push our assertiveness into the shadow. We wear the mask of the good one, the helper, the one who never asks, and that mask, though well-meaning, can slowly erase our deeper self. In everyday life, this might look like being the one who always picks up the phone, always says yes, always sacrifices until the day you feel invisible even in the center of your own life. You may begin to wonder if your worth is only tied to what you do for others, instead of who you are. But the truth is, your kindness is sacred and it deserves protection. Healing begins when we stop confusing self-sacrifice with love. When we recognize that setting a boundary is not a rejection of others, but an act of reverence for the self. When we integrate our shadow, the part that knows how to say no, how to rest, how to be whole, we reclaim the quiet strength beneath our gentleness. And from that place, we can begin again, not harder, not colder, but wiser. Let's explore why your kindness may have led to misunderstanding, and how you can return to your true self without losing your light. Kindness without boundaries feels like disappearing. There's a certain ache in always being the dependable one, the one who shows up, who listens, who makes space for others. Over time, this quiet generosity, when left unguarded, can begin to feel like a slow erasure of self. You give and give, not out of obligation, but because it's who you are. And yet, the more you offer, the more invisible you feel. The respect you hope to build through kindness somehow turns into something colder: expectation, indifference, even disregard. Psychologically, this isn't a failure of your goodness, it's a pattern rooted in how the human psyche responds to unspoken rules. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the part of us we repress in order to maintain the image we think the world needs from us. For many kind souls, this repression comes in the form of self-assertion, the ability to say no, to ask for space, to show strength without apology. When these aspects of our true self are denied, they fall into the unconscious, leaving us overexposed and unprotected. And the world, not out of cruelty, but out of instinct, often senses that lack of boundary. Just as water fills every open space, people tend to lean on whatever will hold them. So if you are always open, always available, never drawing a line, others may not pause to consider your depth. Not because they are heartless, but because, without limits, your presence starts to feel endless. And what is endless becomes expected. And what is expected, sadly, is often no longer valued. Think of a time when you were exhausted, but answered the phone anyway. When you had little left to give, but kept listening, kept smiling, kept showing up. You may have believed this was strength, and in a way, it was. But when strength doesn't include self-respect, it slowly becomes self-abandonment. The truth is, your kindness is not the problem, it never was. The issue is when it's not grounded in your own wholeness. When the true self, the one that holds both light and shadow, is split, and only the good part is allowed to be seen. That's not wholeness. That's a mask. Healing begins when you gently allow space for your unmet needs to have a voice. When you stop silencing your inner boundary in fear of being less loving. Love, when it's real, includes the self. You don't have to stop being kind, but you are allowed to pause, to say, not today, to rest without guilt. That is not selfishness. That is self-honoring. And when you do this, something shifts. Your kindness becomes intentional again, a gift, not a habit. A light that warms, but no longer burns through you. But sometimes it's not about how much you give, it's about what your kindness awakens in others. When your kindness reflects what others cannot face, there's a strange kind of silence that follows when you extend sincere kindness to someone who doesn't know how to receive it. You offer something gentle: patience, empathy, a simple act of care, and instead of gratitude or warmth, you're met with suspicion, withdrawal, or even ridicule. It hurts, not because you expected praise, but because you expected connection. And yet, all too often, it feels like your kindness becomes a mirror others are afraid to look into. Carl Jung called this psychological mechanism projection. When someone cannot accept a part of themselves, whether it's their vulnerability, their longing for connection, or even their own capacity for love, they often see it in others and reject it. Your kindness may not be triggering resentment because of something wrong with you, but because it reflects something unclaimed in them. It touches the parts of their soul they've buried beneath years of mistrust, emotional armor, and a worldview shaped by wounds. Think of someone who scoffs when you offer help, who says "what's the catch?" or avoids your warmth as though it's dangerous. These reactions are rarely personal. Their defenses often unconscious ones against the pain of having once trusted and been let down. When the heart has built walls to survive, even kindness feels like a threat. Your presence, then, becomes more than just another person. You become a reminder of what they've lost or never learned to hold. In daily life, this might look like being avoided by people you're simply trying to care for, or being met with sarcasm when your intentions are pure. Over time, it can make you question your own goodness, wondering if maybe you're too much or not enough. But the truth lies deeper. This isn't about your worth. It's about their fear. Your kindness reflects a way of being they may not be ready to remember or trust. And here's where healing begins, in recognizing that not every rejection of your light is a rejection of you. Sometimes it's the shadow speaking, the part of them that learned long ago not to expect tenderness, not to believe in sincerity. Jung reminds us that what we don't integrate, we cast outward. And so, your compassion becomes the very thing they must push away to keep their inner walls intact. You don't need to change who you are, but you can learn to protect your heart without closing it, to see their resistance not as a verdict on your value, but as evidence of a deeper pain they haven't yet named. Let your kindness remain intact, not by giving it away endlessly, but by offering it consciously, with awareness of what it reflects and what it may awaken in others. When you understand that your presence stirs more than just the surface, you begin to walk with quiet strength, one that heals without needing to be seen, and shines without demanding to be understood. And in a world shaped by ego and control, this quiet authenticity can feel deeply out of place. Kindness that challenges the rules of the world. Sometimes, being kind in a world that rewards toughness feels like swimming upstream. You choose patience when others rush, speak gently where others shout, give freely in a culture that often counts favors. And while part of you believes in the quiet strength of goodness, another part quietly aches, wondering why that gentleness is so often misunderstood, even rejected. You're not weak. You're simply not playing the game others have come to expect. Carl Jung taught that much of our behavior is shaped by the collective unconscious, a shared psychic structure that carries the values and expectations of society. In a world where competition, power, and self-interest dominate, kindness can seem like a foreign language. When you refuse to wear the social mask of dominance or self-promotion, you unsettle a system built on those very things. And often, that system doesn't respond with admiration, it responds with resistance. This resistance isn't just about you. It's about the norms you're choosing to step outside of. Imagine someone who's worked their whole life believing that only the tough survive. To them, your generosity might seem naive. Your calm might be seen as passivity. They might not know what to do with someone who doesn't need to win to feel worthy. So they project their discomfort onto you, calling you too sensitive, too soft, too trusting, because your way of being quietly exposed is the narrowness of theirs. You may notice it in conversations that turn cold when you don't engage in gossip, or in the way some people push your kindness away with sarcasm. Even in professional spaces, your collaborative spirit might be seen as a weakness, simply because it doesn't align with the dominant script of competition and ego. But here's the truth. Your kindness is not a flaw, it's a conscious choice. You are not here to perform toughness. You are here to be real, to walk through the world without abandoning your values. And yes, it can be lonely at times. The world doesn't always make space for softness, but that doesn't mean you should harden yourself to fit. Jung reminds us that what we resist persists. When the world resists your authenticity, it's not your job to change to be accepted, it's your task to stay rooted in the truth of who you are. That truth is not weakness, it is integrity. Let your kindness be intentional, not performative. Let your presence be a quiet invitation for others to remember who they are beneath their masks. And when you feel out of place in this world, remember, you're not here to conform. You're here to bring balance, to remind the world that strength does not have to roar. And that healing begins the moment we stop betraying our own nature. Over time, not only does your presence challenge others, it begins to demand more than you ever offered. When giving too much becomes a disguise for disappearing, there's a quiet moment, maybe you've felt it, when you realize you've been there for everyone but yourself. You show up, you listen, you care, again and again. People lean on you, sometimes without even asking how you're really doing. At first, it feels like love, but over time, it begins to feel like you've become the person who's expected to give and never need. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow not just as a dark or dangerous force, but as the place where we bury all the parts of ourselves we feel we must hide, even the good ones. The need to rest, the desire to be seen, the simple human longing to be cared for, too. In a culture that celebrates giving, especially for women and older generations, self-sacrifice is often praised while self-preservation is misunderstood. Over time, we begin to believe that being needed is the same as being valued, but being always available emotionally, physically, energetically eventually costs us something. We disappear into the roles we play, the support system, the helper, the strong one, and slowly, the authentic self, the one with needs, hopes, limits, gets quieter and quieter. Not because it isn't there, but because we've been taught again and again to keep it in the background for the sake of others. Imagine a mother who has spent decades tending to everyone else's pain, and now, in her quiet moments, struggles to feel seen beyond her caregiving. Or the friend who always answers the late-night calls but doesn't know who to call when her own heart aches. This is not weakness. This is a signal from the soul that the giving has tipped into something else, something that drains rather than connects. Healing begins when we reclaim the right to have needs without shame. When we understand that generosity doesn't mean we must vanish inside of it. That it's possible to be deeply kind while still saying, "I can't right now." That asking for time, space, or understanding is not a failure of love, it's an expression of it. Jung reminds us that wholeness comes from integrating all parts of ourselves, not just the self that gives, but the self that feels, that rests, that receives. If we do not honor our limits, the shadow takes over, and we begin to feel resentment, exhaustion, or emotional emptiness, not because we've been too kind, but because we've forgotten to include ourselves in that kindness. Let this be your gentle reminder. You are not here to pour endlessly from an empty cup. You are here to be, not just to give. And your presence, grounded, clear, and whole, is the most generous gift of all. And the more you're always there, the more people forget that your presence is a choice, not a given. When being too available makes you disappear, there comes a time when your constant presence starts to feel more like a given than a gift. You've always been there, dependable, willing, present, and somewhere along the way, that presence lost its weight in the eyes of others, not because it lacked meaning, but because it became expected. And what's expected often becomes invisible. Carl Jung spoke of the importance of balance between light and shadow, the need to honor both our giving nature and the boundaries that protect it. When kindness is offered without discernment, when availability becomes a reflex rather than a conscious act, the very goodness we intend to share begins to lose its value. The unconscious takes over, and instead of connection, we find depletion. The more we give without pause, the more others assume we don't need anything in return, not space, not rest, not recognition. In daily life, it might look like friends calling only when they need something, never asking how you are, or co-workers assuming you'll cover the shift, stay late, pick up the slack because you always do. The small sighs you swallow, the favors you agree to when your body says no. It starts subtly, but over time, it leaves a mark. A quiet loneliness, the kind that doesn't shout, but lingers like a house always open, but rarely visited for the sake of you. Psychologically, what's happening here isn't just burnout. It's a disconnection from the true self. We wear a mask of helpfulness so often that we forget it is a mask. And in doing so, we hide parts of ourselves, the parts that long to be considered, chosen. appreciated without needing to prove our worth through constant doing. The unconscious begins to speak when we ignore this dissonance. We may feel resentment, guilt, or a sense of being used, but we don't always know why. These feelings are signs from the shadow, whispering that something essential is being denied. Not our ability to give, but our right to give wisely, to give from fullness, not obligation. To reclaim that balance is not to stop being kind. It is to return to the authentic self, the one who chooses when and how to give, who understands that love is not measured in self-erasure. Healthy boundaries don't shut others out. They shine a light on what is truly valuable. They teach others that your time, your energy, your presence, they matter. And so, the healing begins with one gentle truth. You are not here to be constantly available. You are here to be real. And in your realness, your pauses, your needs, your sacred yes, and know you give the world something far deeper than service. You give it your truth, and that is always worth honoring. So the question is no longer how much you give, but how gently you protect the heart that gives. Protecting your kindness without losing yourself. There's a moment quiet and aching when you begin to wonder if being kind is worth it. When the warmth you offer so freely is met not with appreciation, but with distance, disregard, or even contempt. And yet, no matter how often it happens, you keep showing up. Because kindness isn't something you perform, it's who you are. But even the kindest heart needs protection. Not to harden, but to survive whole. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow as the parts of ourselves we hide, not just our rage or fear, but also our power, our boundaries, and the voice that says enough. When we give endlessly without discernment, we bury these protective instincts in the unconscious. We trade self-respect for acceptance, and in doing so, unconsciously send a message: I'll be here. Always, no matter how I'm treated. Not out of weakness, but from a longing to be needed, to be loved. In everyday life, this may show up as saying yes when your body says no, staying in conversations that drain you, or listening to others' pain while your own goes unheard. Over time, these small betrayals of self add up, not just in the body, which grows weary, but in the heart, which quietly begins to question its own worth. The culture around us often praises relentless giving, especially in older generations. You're told it's noble to put others first, to push through, to stay quiet and kind. But what's missing from this message is the quiet truth that you are allowed to guard your soul. That real kindness includes knowing when to say no, when to step back, when to choose peace over pleasing. When we don't protect our inner world, we risk becoming a reflection of what others need from us, rather than an expression of our authentic self. We wear the social mask of the dependable one, the caregiver, the strong one, and yet beneath it lives someone who also longs to rest, to be held, to be seen not for what they give, but for who they are. Healing begins when you stop equating love with overgiving, when you let yourself feel the anger that rises when you've been overlooked, not as something to silence, but as a signal from the shadow, a part of you begging to be reintegrated, not denied. Boundaries are not walls. They are the contours of your truth. And truth, when honored, has a quiet kind of power. Let this be your reminder: you can protect your kindness without losing it. You can honor your limits without closing your heart. And the love you give when chosen, not demanded, carries more strength, more depth, and more healing than anything done out of obligation. You don't have to stop being good, but you deserve to be good to yourself, too. Kindness with boundaries is still kindness. At some point, many kind-hearted people realize that their endless giving hasn't brought the connection or respect they hoped for. Instead, they're left feeling invisible, taken for granted, or quietly exhausted. This doesn't mean your kindness was wrong, but it may mean it's time to offer it differently, first, to yourself. Carl Jung described the shadow as the unconscious parts of ourselves we push away, often our anger, our needs, even our right to say no. When we suppress these aspects in favor of being endlessly agreeable, the shadow doesn't disappear. It shows up in quiet resentment, burnout, or a sense of disconnection from who we really are. Think of the caregiver who's always there for everyone, who never asks for help, who wears the mask of strength even while quietly falling apart inside. Or the person who avoids conflict so much they've forgotten what they actually want. These patterns, often learned over a lifetime, come at the cost of our inner truth. The healing comes when we realize that boundaries are not rejection or self-respect. Saying not today or I need rest doesn't erase your kindness. It makes it real, sustainable, and rooted in self-awareness. True kindness flows from wholeness, not self-erasure. You don't need to stop being a good person. You just need to include yourself in the circle of your care. And when you do, you'll find that your presence carries more weight. Your yes becomes more sincere, and your life more aligned with your authentic self. Let this be your quiet permission. You are allowed to take up space, to be seen, and to matter not just for what you give, but for who you are.